Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. I am your host, Bob Jones, and I've been trying to contact you about your expired vehicle warranty. All right, folks, we are going to do an interesting episode today. We are going to talk about a very popular but older writer named H.P. Lovecraft, who, of course, was around in the 20s, and he did a lot of writing in the 20s and 30s. But his legacy is quite extensive, and it's having a big influence on comic books, especially lately with the MCU and stuff like that. So I just wanted to take a look at the effect that he's had on comics, at least when it comes to the big two. More specifically Marvel, but I'm also going to touch on DC. But before we get into that, we got a couple bits of news. All right, my friend Lehman is a sought-after Lovecraftian impersonator. I know Lehman. Lehman does a podcast, and he also does audiobooks. And I was talking to Lehman about doing my Lucius Fogg audiobooks, but it ended up going a different direction. But I do know Lehman. He's worked with the lady who edits my book, Salome Jones. Okay, so we're going to kick off with some good news. Bob Odenkirk, I've been to the town where he is mayor. Okay, back to this. Bob Odenkirk, star of Better Call Saul, is back at work today. Less than 2 months after suffering a heart attack, while he was on the set of his AMC series. Now, Odenkirk posted an image of himself in the makeup chair today. He was getting done up to be Jimmy McGill again, which is a younger version of himself. And, a younger version of his character from the Breaking Bad spinoff, too. So there is a lot of stuff to do to makeup, but this is, he's back on set. He seems to be doing good. And this is going into the 6th and final season of Better Call Saul. So happy to see Bob Odenkirk back at work and doing well. There was a bit of interesting announcement today having to do with Batman, or more specifically, Batman the Audio Adventures. Now, I thought this is fascinating because HBO Max is doing this. And they're going to do this audio adventure where they'll have just a card up on the screen that says Batman the Audio Adventures and whatnot. And then it'll just be audio. They're basically doing an old-time radio program. It's going to premiere on Batman Day, September 18th. It's a 10-episode adventure, and it's being done as, and this is how they state it, a rollicking, over-the-top Batman adventure, drawing inspiration from the spirited fun of the 1960s Batman TV series fronted by Adam West, the vintage noir atmosphere of Batman the Animated Series, and the entire 80-plus year history of Batman. Now, this is being done a little tongue-in-cheek, comedically. It's being written and directed by SNL Emmy Award winner Dennis McNicholas. And it stars, this is where it gets really interesting, playing Batman / Bruce Wayne is Jeffrey Wright, who we're currently seeing as the Watcher, and he's going to play Commissioner Gordon in the upcoming Batman movie. Well, he gets to play Bruce Wayne Batman here. As Catwoman, we're getting Rosario Dawson, and as the Riddler, John Leguizamo. Now, it also features performances, but they haven't said as what yet. But listen to this list. You got Chris Parnell, Melissa Villaseñor, Seth Meyers, Brent Spiner from Star Trek. Happy Star Trek Day, everybody. Ike Barinholtz, Bobby Moynihan, Kenan Thompson, Jason Sudeikis, Alan Tudyk, Heidi Gardner, Brooke Shields, Paul Scheer, Tim Meadows, Fred Armisen, and Ray Wise. So that's the Batman, the audio adventure, and it debuts, like I said, September 18th on HBO Max, Batman Day. And you know, what the hell? A radio drama in 2020, sure, 2021, sure. What the heck? I'm ready for it. All right, JD, we're going to be talking about Lovecraft's influence on the Marvel Universe. Now, before we get to that, though, Benedict Cumberbatch was talking recently about the upcoming Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and addressed the change in directors. And as the star and having worked with Scott Derrickson, this is obviously an important thing to him. And he said, I was sad to hear about it, but that was not my decision. I completely respected the studio's decision, and it was done very amicably. Now, that's important, that the way it was handled. I mean, Marvel has parted ways with directors in the past. Edgar Winter? Edgar Wright, Edgar Winter. I get the two names confused. But the original Ant-Man director, Patty Jenkins, when she was originally directing Thor: The Dark World. Edgar Wright, thank you. So there's been a couple times that directors have parted ways with them. But how they handle it is just as important. And so it's nice to hear that it was very, very amicable and well. Yeah, I realized I know who Edgar Winter is and Edgar Wright is, but I get their names confused. So, just like Black Comic Universe, Black Comic University. All right. This, of course, was the decision, again, for a change from Scott Derrickson, who directed the first film, to Sam Raimi, who previously, of course, did Evil Dead and the Spider-Man movies. Now, Cumberbatch also spoke about working with Raimi, and it was kind of interesting because he said he was an assured pair of hands who knew that world. He's got certain Raimi traits. The smashed zoom close-up, the mixture of just on the level of horror and just on the level of camp. There's fun in there, but there should be some real thrills as well. He added that Raimi encouraged him to improvise through filming on the Doctor Strange sequel. With the first film, you always looked into the script because it's the origin story, but there was a lot more freedom this time around. I guess because we were not literally making it up as we go along, but sometimes it felt like that. And he shared the fact that things aren't quite as locked down story-wise as you'd expect with an MCU film. He said, Marvel has this amazing ability to come into production. We really just have to start shooting now. It doesn't matter that the third act isn't quite where you want it to be. And you really do things on a wing and a prayer sometimes. Now, after Derrickson stepped down, Marvel brought in Jade Haley Bartlett and Loki head writer Michael Waldron to do kind of a fresh take on the script or a fresh draft. So whatever Derrickson had been working on seems to be long gone. So JD says, can't give you too much crap. Sometimes you think you're Dan Wickline, other times you're calling yourself Bob Jones. Yeah, the split personalities are strong in me. All right. So we're going to get to our main topic. And speaking of Doctor Strange, I've noticed that Marvel has been upping their horror elements in their series lately. And in What If, we got a Hydra creature that Captain America fought, or Captain Carter fought, which a lot of people are assuming is Shumagorath. We got a whole slew of demonic creatures in the Doctor Strange episode. You know what? Before we go any further, Kyle, can you run the spoiler warning, please? All right, because I'm going to have to talk about some characters and creatures that have popped up in a couple things recently, and it might be spoilery. So if you're not completely caught up or you don't care, stick around. But if you don't like spoilers, watch anyway. Hit the like button before you go, though. So we got a slew of demonic creatures in the Doctor Strange episode, including the possible return of that same tentacled creature. If that's Shumagorath, then yeah. And then we got zombies last night. Now, again, I got to mention Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. So, Kyle, step away now. This is it. If you haven't seen the film. And what's funny is I haven't seen the film either. I'm literally going to go see it as soon as this show is over. I've got tickets to go to the theater. But we know that the thing manipulating Wenwu in the film is the Dweller in Darkness. And of course, you know, you look at the Dweller in Darkness in comics and he looks like freaking Cthulhu. He's got the head just at blue instead of green. And of course, there have been the rumors of Shumagorath appearing in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. All of this is not only horror, but most of it, excluding the zombies, is what many would call Lovecraftian horror. Now, I mean, even Strange's magic is considered eldritch because it taps into the energies that come from the eldritch creatures, which are Cthulhu and Shumagorath. And so you're borrowing your energy from these creatures anyway. So I thought it might be time to take a look at the influence of H.P. Lovecraft has had on comics, well, you know, Marvel and DC, and by extension, the MCU itself. So there's our topic for today. Now, Howard Philip Lovecraft was born in Providence, Rhode Island in 1890, and he died in 1937. So he was only 47 years old when he passed, and he did a lot of writing in that time. Not just writing stories, but he also did a lot of correspondence. He wrote letters like crazy to a lot of different authors. He had a lot of authors that were considered would be like pen pals, but they would share story ideas and concepts and stuff. And this was kind of how he built up the mythos. Now, I'll get into what that. I mean, his claim to fame, of course, is the weird science, fantasy, and horror fictions that he wrote. And the best known were the Cthulhu mythos. He would sell a lot of stories to Weird Tales magazine, which was probably one of the more popular pulps at the time. So these got out there, and he had some pretty big name ones. I mean, even people who haven't read Lovecraft are probably familiar with names like The Call of Cthulhu, At the Mountains of Madness, and maybe even Shadow over Innsmouth. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into his history, and it's quite extensive, but also it's a bit problematic at times. I mean, he was definitely a product of his times. He had some prejudices that came out. He also became very hermit, very reclusive as it got older. It got to, I believe he actually died at 47 because he didn't trust to go to the doctor. Lots of first-person narratives. Holy cow, Herbie. Uh, some of his work. So yeah, I'm not going to go too deep into him himself, but instead I'm going to look at his work, how it permeated the comic genre. Now, part of how the mythos got built up is there was a group of writers, often called the Lovecraft Circle. And these writers added to the mythos and helped it grow. And this was August Derleth, Clark Ashton Smith, Robert Bloch, who of course wrote Psycho, and Robert E. Howard, of course, the creator of Conan and Kull and Solomon Kane. JD says, so he was an anti-vaxxer before it was cool. I don't know if it's even cool at this point, but in a way, he had his issues. Now, Howard, of course, these stories, and Howard is probably one of the most prolific of the people that wrote about him, became this shared universe of eldritch evil, basically. And these stories ended up having their influence over both Marvel and DC, but in very different ways. Now, how they got brought in is the interesting part. Where, well, okay, before I get in, I think it's important to kind of describe Lovecraft's writing for anybody who hasn't read him. It's very different than most fiction you find on the shelf. He wrote dark, creepy tales that starred normal people, but put in very bizarre situations. Intelligent people having to deal with like gods and demons, but without superpowers or magic. The best way to describe this might be comparing two of the most popular tabletop role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons and Call of Cthulhu. Now, in D&D, you become an adventurer, you go out, you go on quests to gain money and power and fame or to save your town. I mean, there's all these reasons why you quest. And whatever your reason is, you use a combination of your skills to fight and kill monsters and bad guys until you're victorious. I mean, that's pretty much D&D. It's a big adventure fantasy. Call of Cthulhu gives you no powers, no special weapons, and basically you just have your intellect, and they toss you into a situation that you really have no way capable of dealing with it. And you try to either solve it or escape. Running away is an option in the game. And it's a viable option. But before... And you have to do all this before you completely lose your mind. Sanity is actually an important stat in the game. So it's not a matter of becoming more powerful and growing like you would in D&D. It's basically just to keep your mind intact. Dagon is a very good movie. There's a lot of good adaptations of Lovecraft out there. My ex-wife was a huge Lovecraft fan and is who turned me on to the series, or to the author itself. I had not gotten into him, and then I learned a lot just from talking to her and also doing some reading. But, his writing, it's more than just what he wrote about. It was the way he wrote. He used very thick, descriptive sentences to set mood and tone without really giving you details. It's the weirdest thing. He would hint at one. He'd hint at the monster, what the monsters would look like, but never outright describe them. So you could kind of make it up in your own imagination. He'd give you little bits so you'd form it in your own mind, and that's actually a good way to do it, because what we are going to create in our own imagination is going to be very scary to us personally, where as soon as we see it, it kind of diffuses some of that fear. It's like Jaws. Why Jaws worked so well wasn't because the shark looked good. It's because they didn't show the shark that much. And I realize that's because the shark didn't work. But that's the thing. Yeah. JD, yeah, lots of details while still being vague. Never noticed it before. I noticed it very clearly, and I ended up using that. He would literally write that a creature could not be described. I used to joke with Debbie about that. It's like, he's literally telling you that he can't describe that thing. That's and I would pick on her about it being lazy writing, but it isn't. It's just a very unique style. His writing was so dense that it actually gave me an idea for a story that I did over at Zenoscope. And I tied it into the Wonderland franchise. I did 2 miniseries there, Call of Wonderland and Madness of Wonderland, as you can tell, named after, similar to Call of Cthulhu and Madness, or In the Mountains of Madness, which featured Lovecraft as a character. And he used his writings to create a barrier between our reality and other realms. And the more he wrote and the more words, the denseness of his words, the stronger the barrier got. And that was the flashback story. And basically it was Lovecraft versus Charles Dodson, who is Lewis Carroll. So I had that going on. And then in the future time, or in the modern day setting, the barriers were coming down because of how society has moved into these shorthands where we just use emojis or quick little abbreviations and shorthand, like I said, shorthand to do everything. So it's tearing down those barriers that Lovecraft built up. Now, I had a lot of fun doing the series, and I wanted to do a third one. I was going to call it Shadow over Wonderland. But by the time that we got around to it, they had already kind of taken the series in a different direction. So never got to do the third one, but it was a lot of fun. And they're still out there if you ever want to look for them. Now, Lovecraft and his circle, that they had one other thing in common besides they all liked to write in this Cthulhu mythos, is that they used a common agency to get work. And one of the guys that worked at the agency was a young man named Julius Schwartz. Now, DC comic fans should instantly recognize the name, as Schwartz would go on to become an editor at DC Comics. And he was a very fascinating character over there. He had these 3 rules for doing a comic cover. Basically said that if you want good sales, you need one of these 3 things. Either an empty costume, a gorilla, or a purple background. He was convinced that those things were what made a book sell. That kids would pick up if they saw an empty costume, a gorilla, or a purple background. And if you could work all 3 into one cover, you had a hit. If you had Gorilla Grodd trying to tear apart Flash's empty costume with a purple background, man, that was going to be the sales juggernaut of the month. Now, Schwartz was also the editor on the Batman titles when Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams began their run. And 2 things that were introduced in that run were Arkham Asylum, which, of course, became the place that nowadays nude variant covers, or cosplay covers are another one. But so Arkham Asylum was introduced as a place to put the crazier members of Batman's Rogues Gallery. The Joker was constantly going there, stuff like that. Well, Arkham is a fictional city created by Lovecraft. And it was basically a fictional city in Massachusetts. And when they talk about Gotham City in the DC universe, that's supposed to be Boston. Into a lot, where Metropolis is New York, Gotham is Boston. So both of these, Arkham and Gotham, these fictional cities, are supposed to be in Massachusetts. So there's that tie there, and they brought in the Arkham Asylum. Arkham Asylum, where we have not updated our security features since opening. True. They've also haven't checked on any of their clients. Now, the other one that was introduced was Ra's al Ghul. Now, Ra's al Ghul, or the Demon's Head, is credited as being created by Julius Schwartz, Denny O'Neil, and Neil Adams, with Schwartz specifically getting credit for the concept and the name. And I don't know about you, but Ra's al Ghul, if you have any reading history with Lovecraft, is a very Lovecraftian name. I mean, that is something that Lovecraft would have come up with. So it kind of feels like Schwartz had picked up some of the influence from Lovecraft going into DC. And when it came time to take Batman a little more seriously, when they were trying to distance themselves from the recently canceled Batman TV series, the Adam West series, they moved forward and he started putting some of this Lovecraftian style into Batman. I think that's also around the same time that Man-Bat, if he wasn't created then, he was definitely brought up more, and the stories became more psychological. Now, the Lovecraft influence over at Marvel, it kind of creeped in a different way through Roy Thomas. Now, in 1970, Roy Thomas secured the rights to Conan, and of course, created by Robert E. Howard, one of the Lovecraft circle of writers. Throughout his work on Conan, Howard had created a lot of Lovecraftian style characters, including Shumagorath as one of the great old ones. Now, a lot of the things Conan and Howard's other properties of Cole the Conqueror and Solomon Kane, a lot of the things they faced off against were heavily influenced by Howard's correspondence and idea exchanges with Lovecraft. They would, bounce ideas back and forth, and a lot of the bad guys or the evil stuff they would have to deal with were very Lovecraftian. They were very similar in that. And then when Thomas came in and got the rights to do the Howard stuff, whether it was influenced by Howard directly, or if Thomas was also a Lovecraft fan, that style came into play. And Thomas became the main editor as well. So it started to kind of permeate throughout the series. Now, not just in Conan, where he took on Shumagorath in the comics, but in 1972, they brought Doctor Strange back in a Marvel Premiere series instead of his own series. And there was a 6-issue story arc which saw Doctor Strange head to a small town in New England near the Quabbin Reservoir. Now, the Quabbin Reservoir is a location straight out of Lovecraft's story, The Color Out of Space. Now, here Strange would learn of the town's connection to the Thanatosian tombs, which were kind of a collection of Lovecraft, Howard, and Thomas's own writings put together. So I'm going to stop right there because I just realized we are getting to the halfway point. We need to get to a quick commercial. So stick around and we'll pick this up immediately after the break. Stay tuned.
There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit ComicShopLocator.com to find a store near you.
All right, before we get back into it real quick, let me remind you guys, please hit the like button. If you are on Twitch, if you are on YouTube, hit the thumbs up, and the subscribe button would be helpful. If you're on Facebook, you could do the like, you could do the heart, the hug. Those are all great. I'm good with those. But any of those things help us out a lot. The more views we get, the better we can do. And the YouTube subscriptions are very important. So if you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube, even if you watch us on a different platform, please take a moment, and it would help us out a lot if you could subscribe to us on YouTube. Kyle, are you there? I was hoping Kyle could tell us the rundown for the rest of the shows today, because I never remember them because I'm really bad at that. But hopefully he will pop them into the little private chat, and then I can read them out to you in just a few moments. Now, let's get back to our discussion on Lovecraft. Oh, wait, I think we're getting it. We're getting it. Rex and the Not Nicks are up next with Comic Collectibles. Then we've got Kicking It with Henri and Kevin. And seems like there should be more. I think he wrote That's It, but that's not English. So, all right. All right, let's get back to it. So, Roy Thomas wrote the Thanatosian Tombs into the series, which was a collection, like I said, of Lovecraft's work, Howard's work, and his own writing. And this is also where he would introduce Shumagorath as a villain for Doctor Strange. So here we have a Conan villain moving forward into becoming a Doctor Strange villain. And it's out now. Dormammu was already a Doctor Strange villain, and was a very Lovecraftian style villain too. But I don't know how much Ditko was. I mean, we'll talk about Ditko in a few minutes. But so you've got Shumagorath popping up here, and then there were many other examples of Lovecraftian homages in Thomas's work, including he introduced Toth Amon and Kulan Gath in the pages of Conan as dark sorcerers. He introduced the black gods of Ryleth in the pages of Cole. And over in Thor, Jerry Conway, following suit, created the Dweller in Darkness, who's a fear lord, and he claims to be the cousin of Nightmare, though Nightmare doesn't claim him at all, says it ain't they're no relation. They went on Jerry Springer's show together, I guess, but yeah, Nightmare refuses to accept the Dweller as part of the family. But now the Dweller isn't part of Marvel's old ones, but you look at the design for the character in the comics, and like I said, he looks like Cthulhu. Now, other examples of Lovecraftian stories that appeared throughout the years of Marvel, there's a Marvel team-up featuring Spider-Man and Red Sonja, and they're trying to stop Kulan Gath from sacrificing the two of them to the elder gods. In the 90s, there was a Conan story where he had to destroy the ironbound books of Shumagorath to banish the Great Old One. And, of course, in The Scarlet Witch, #1, Wanda Maximoff and Agatha Harkness find themselves in a crypt in New England in hopes of finding the Necronomicon. Now, that's a fictional tomb, of course, that was created by Lovecraft, but is now used in all sorts of different places. Shumagorath has popped up most recently in the pages of Doctor Strange during Jason Aaron's run called Last Days of Magic. And in the Savage Avengers, you've got them going up against Kulan Gath again. So there's been this Lovecraftian influence on Marvel all through the years whenever it pops up. Now, I don't know how much the creation of Doctor Strange was influenced by Lovecraft. We can see it as the story progressed, especially when Roy Thomas got a hold of it, but it's not that far from it either. Now, the only author that Steve Ditko is kind of associated with is that of Ayn Rand, who definitely is not the same thing as Lovecraft. And I think that's part of the falling out that Ditko had with Stan Lee, is that he was writing Spider-Man and The Question and characters like that very much in the Randian style, where Stan would rewrite all the dialogue to make him connect better with the readers. And I think that caused a wedge between them. But with Doctor Strange, Stan was kind of hands-off, and you don't get the Randian influence on Doctor Strange, but you do get what appears to be a Lovecraftian influence. So could Steve Ditko have been a fan of Lovecraft? It's absolutely possible. But in the couple of biographies I've read or listened to about him, I don't think the name has come up. So, and I wasn't able to find any connection. But again, it's possible. I mean, there's similarities between the Sorcerer Supreme and the villains like Dormammu and the Cthulhu mythos. Even over on the Lovecraft Wiki, the fan-driven Wikipedia page, there are entries for Stephen Strange, Dormammu, Shumagorath, and Cthon, who, of course, is the creator of the Darkhold, which we just saw in WandaVision. So, again, there's a lot of connections that are going on. Now, that's where I'm kind of curious. I mean, the popularity of Lovecraft now, 130 years or 140 years, 130 years after his birth, is kind of at an all-time high. You know, people tap into it. There are pastiches written about it. Just Lovecraft's influence is all over the place. You look at the TV series like Stranger Things or Lovecraft Country. You know, it's getting all through pop culture right now. So it makes a lot of sense that Marvel would be leaning into it where they can. And also, and this is something I kind of came up with this morning, and I'm seeing how it works. So let me run this by you guys. The first three phases of Marvel were basically tied to Tony Stark. All the villains that popped up tended to be related to something Tony did. Ultron was created by Tony, even though in the comics he's created by Hank Pym. The Vulture, it's Tony's actions that cause the Vulture. It's Tony's actions that cause Mephisto. Tony is the driving force of the first three phases, and the first three phases end with his death. Now, in a lot of ways, I think with Robert Downey Jr. stepping out, Benedict Cumberbatch is stepping in and becoming that new driving force for the next phase, or the next phases, depending. And with that in mind, they're shifting a lot of stuff from Tony Stark driven to Stephen Strange driven, and from technology to magic. With Strange in that role in the MCU, that means eldritch creatures make more sense at this point rather than technology characters. Let's again take a look at Shang-Chi, who in the comics is a very grounded and straightforward series. There's not a lot of mysticism in it. It's a classic martial arts thing. I mean, Iron Fist has more mystical connections than Shang-Chi does. Shang-Chi a lot of times were written almost like a spy thriller more than anything else. So we see what they've done with him in the MCU, and they've given him a much more mystical origin. They've changed where the Mandarin's ring. Well, first thing, they tied him to the Mandarin. In the comics, he's not tied to the Mandarin. He has a different father. He originally was Fu Manchu and then renamed when they decided Fu Manchu, A, they didn't have the rights to it anymore, and B, they didn't want the rights to it anymore. So they're tying him into the Mandarin, and they're even changing the Mandarin, who was an Iron Man villain, to being more of a Doctor Strange villain. He's being pushed by the Dweller in Darkness to do these things. He's using these rings that, in the comics, they're alien technology from the McLuhans. And here there's more of a mystical connection. So it feels like not only are they embracing the mysticism and pushing Doctor Strange into that lead role, but they're bringing along other things like Shang-Chi. And I want to see how that's going to play in stuff like the Eternals and other movies where, we're getting mysticism. Iron Man 1 and 2, the villains were all because of Tony Stark. Iron Man 3, is that going to be, Spider-Man 1 and 2 were because of Tony Stark, the villains. Will the villain in Spider-Man 3 be a Doctor Strange villain because that's where we're shifting to? It just feels like we're getting that big of a shift. Like this Shang-Chi has become the baton passing. I mean, again, they're changing a classic Iron Man villain to be more of a Doctor Strange villain. They even take the time to clean up a plot thread from Iron Man 3 with Trevor Slattery to finish up that storyline from All Hail the King in Shang-Chi. So they're bringing a lot of outside stuff into the Shang-Chi story. And from everything I'm being told and from what I've heard, the story works. I'll know probably more in an hour when I'm sitting in the theater watching it. But it just seems like they're really shifting things in the Marvel Universe. And it's going to be fascinating to see how it moves forward. Whether we're going to continue with this, is this an overall thing? Because I know at the end of Shang-Chi, they find out the ring signals something, and we don't know what it is. And a lot of people are assuming it's either an alien thing, it's a celestial, but what if it's an elder god? What if it's signaling Shumagorath? Because he's just taken out the Dweller in Darkness. Seems like a possibility there, too. So, now, just how Lovecraftian will Doctor Strange be? That's the next question. And again, if you think about it, I mean, it's called in the Multiverse of Madness. One of Lovecraft's most famous stories is in the Mountains of Madness. They literally just swapped one word. Director Sam Raimi has been sprinkling a ton of mythos into Evil Dead series, the series of movies, including the Necronomicon. That's the big book Ash goes after. And then there's that persistent rumor that Shumagorath is going to be the main bad guy. So it really does sound like we are going to get the Cthulhu mythos in the MCU with this upcoming film. It does feel like that connection. So I'm curious, JD, have you seen Shang-Chi? If JD's still with us, okay. You can find Bob Jones on. Now, so that's what I'm thinking, is that they're taking the MCU into a different direction. We have these outlying threads that they're building on. We have what's going on with Doctor Strange and in the multiverse. But that felt like it was a Kang story. But now it's starting to feel like it may be more of an Elder God story, of a Shumagorath, of how that'll play back into Kang. I don't know. That's kind of an interesting connection there. Also, you've got the whole sub thing with Val building a Dark Avengers team. So I wonder if we're looking at Marvel doing phases as more individual than the first three. Because the first three phases were the Thanos saga, or the Infinity Saga, I think is what they called it. I don't know if we're getting that. Is it going to be the multiverse saga? The first big change is the fact that the number of movies in a phase seem to be much bigger. We're getting a lot more movies in phase 4 and TV shows and stuff like that than we did in phase 1. So if this is the first phase of a new saga, we're getting a lot more story. So are they doing that, or is it going to be more self-contained per phase? Is this the multiverse story? Is this the multiverse saga or the Kang saga? Will that carry over into into phase 2 or phase 5, I guess it would be? And then phase 6, will we get a big bad like Thanos, or will we get smaller big bads like Kang? I mean, will Kang end up becoming like Kang War and being the next Thanos, or will he be a little more contained, staying just in one phase? There's so many questions. Again, I joked with Paul Story the other night on Popco the Writers that I would love for Kevin Feige to do an AMA, because I would just camp out, spend the entire time asking him questions, trying to get explanations, not so much on what's going to, but what is the structure now? We're so off the rails that it's hard to really figure out where they're going. There was an obvious structure to the Infinity Saga. It made sense. We got X number of movies, then we got an Avengers movie, and that was the end of the phase. Then we got X number of movies and another Avengers movie, and that was the end of the phase. And then again, they did the same pattern, and then they had an epilogue basically with Spider-Man Far From Home, which really now feels like it's more part of phase 4 than phase 3. Like, phase 3 really ended with Endgame, and Spider-Man Far From Home was just put out because they had it done. But it does feel like it's more of the next phase, because it takes place after WandaVision, it takes place after Loki, and it takes place after Falcon and the Winter Soldier too, I believe. So maybe it is actually part of phase 4, in which case we get 2 Spider-Man movies in phase 4. Well, we got 2 Iron Man movies in phase 1. So that makes sense. Yeah. Well, so I'm looking forward to going to see Shang-Chi to see how all these pieces are going to tie together. Again, I've been hearing about them, and that's where a lot of this theory is coming from. I can't really do my job and not hear spoilers, so it kind of sucks. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to the movie. I'm looking forward to the action, too, because that's what I've been hearing a lot, is that the action is so wonderful in it, that the fight scenes and the choreographing and all that. So that should be really good. And like I said, I'll be sitting in that theater in about an hour from now. But I'm kind of curious. I'm going to be paying close attention to the mystical aspects of it. And we're also getting, they've got these different types of magic that they do in the Marvel Universe, and everything's color coded. You know, you've got the magic from Wanda is chaos magic and it's red. Doctor Strange's magic is considered eldritch magic, and because they borrow from other beings of other dimensions. So, and that's orange. And then Agatha Harkness has her magic, which is purple, which I'm not sure what the difference is between her and what Doctor Strange does, but obviously they're different colors, so they have to be different. But we've got all these different types of magic growing in the MCU, and it seems like what we're going to get here is yet another level of magic, another kind of magic, something separate. And also what I hear is that there really is no color to it. You know, there's no casting thing to it, energy signature. So, again, I'm really curious about that. I very much am looking forward to seeing the Trevor Slattery storyline being played out. I've heard how it's played out, but I want to see it. I also want to see Morris. So if you've already seen the movie, then you know who or what Morris is, and I'm very curious about Morris. Morris sounds like he's going to be a lot of fun. I even watched the pitch meeting that came out. That gave away some of the things, but those are pretty funny. Ryan George does a really good job with those. So, all right. Remember, coming up after this show, we have got Rex and the Not Nicks talking comic book collectibles. One of the things on today's show, if I remember correctly, is a Scotty Young variant of... Oh, man. I had it in my mind a minute ago. I was really impressed by it's a Scotty Young variant of the Indestructible Hulk #1, but it's signed by Mark Waid. So that's up on the block. There's a True Believer version of Amazing Spider-Man. There's some remarked. There's a Secret Wars #1 signed and remarked with a Spider-Man head by Ken Hazer. There's a CGC graded Detective Comics #1000, the Jim Lee variant. So there's some great books coming up. So you'll want to check that out. There's also a Ken Hazer Transformers versus G.I. Joe #1 with, I don't know which Transformer that is, but it's a very cool looking Transformer. So a bunch of good books coming up. Stick around for that. After that, we have Kicking It with Henri and Kevin. And I will be back tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, which will be this is going to be the last evening show for the Dan Wickline Show. Starting next week, I will be doing the show Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at the same time, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. So Thursday will no longer be a later show. They'll all be at the same time. And tomorrow night, we're going to do our spoiler discussion of Marvel's What If, having to do with the zombie episode, which I watched. And wow, somebody hurt somebody at Marvel. It's getting dark over there. The joy has completely left. There's no joy in Mudville. It's pretty much gone. But I'll be doing that on Thursday. And then next week, on Tuesday, when as many people as possible, I think it's a fair length of time, we will do a Shang-Chi spoiler discussion. So we will spend the hour on Tuesday talking about the Shang-Chi movie. So come join me for that. Tell me what you think of the movie. We'll have a good chat about that too. So that'll be Tuesday. So tomorrow night, stick around for us. Come and join in on the What If conversation. Tuesday, the Shang-Chi conversation. And please hit the like and subscribe buttons. Again, that helps us out a lot, especially if you subscribe on YouTube. We're trying to get to 1,000 YouTube subscribers, because that opens up a lot of tools that we currently don't have access to. So if you could help us out by doing that, it would be greatly appreciated. It would make Kyle happy. And there isn't much that makes Kyle happy anymore. He's kind of a grumpy guy. You know, talk about all these Marvel movies and he's all grumpy. Talk about comic books and he's all grumpy. I don't know what it is. I don't know how we're going to make him happy, but I think getting us to 1,000 YouTube subscribers would make him happy. He says tacos makes him happy. So YouTube subscriptions and tacos. So if you can send Kyle some tacos, please do. Otherwise, just go over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button. All right, guys, we are going to wrap that up. Thank you for joining me. Again, see you tomorrow night for the Marvel What If Zombies spoiler discussion. Have a great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.
To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds. A promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey, and behind every page there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop today. Visit ComicShopLocator.com today.